Brilliant. I would appreciate.
I'm just so happy to be back with all of you today. It's been a minute, but here we are. It's nothing like worship at Church of the Village. No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. We'll get there together or we'll never get there at all. We'll get there together or we'll never get there at all. The Emmaus Road story, we'll sing it more in a second, don't worry. The Emmaus Road story always brings up this question for me, especially at the beginning of the story. How did this whole Jesus thing not fall apart on day one? How did it not fall apart on day one? How come this movement of love and liberation centered around Jesus? How did it manage not to just survive, but thrive in the absence of its crucified leader? Sure, there was Easter, and certainly there were women who could attest to the empty tomb and the missing Jesus. But still, at the beginning of the Emmaus story, there's a testimony to how quickly the whole thing might have just begun to unravel as the community that formed around Jesus falls into confusion and grief. They've lost their friend. Also, they've lost the center of gravity for their community. And things could spin out of control so easily. The story we just heard, and hopefully we felt the story and experienced the story, that story happens on that same day of Easter. It's not even evening. At best, it's late afternoon, and the sun is still up, and already things feel unsettled. They feel unsettling. So 2 disciples, one of whom, as you heard, one of whom is named Cleopas, and the other of whom isn't named Cleopas, they decide to go for a walk. They have heard the good news. They know the stories about the empty tomb and the women and the angels. They know the stories. But Jesus is nowhere to be found, and everything is up in the air. I imagine they need some air. They feel the need to put some distance between themselves and the horror of the past few days. And so they leave Jerusalem, heading for Emmaus. I should say that nobody today knows where Emmaus is or where it was. Scholars have different ideas, but it's almost like Emmaus could be anywhere or nowhere. I'm not very bothered by that. To me, the road to Emmaus doesn't need to be a specific place, because I think I've been on that road of disappointment, that road of disillusionment, that road of loss and frustration and confusion. I know what it is to lose someone and not know what comes next. I get the feeling when I hear the story of the Emmaus Road that when those 2 disciples walk away from Jerusalem, they leave because they can't stay. As Jorge reminded us last week, staying in community is hard. And without Jesus, these 2 just need to find some space. I think it's no stretch to say that we have all walked that road to wherever, that road of disappointment and disillusionment, the road of loss and frustration and confusion, that road to Emmaus. And maybe we've walked that road with Cleopas and his friend. Do you know where else in the Bible it talks about Cleopas? Anybody know? Want to guess? Nowhere. Nowhere. It doesn't mention him anywhere else. We know nothing also about his friend, except that they are a disciple and they are not one of the 12. We know nothing of gender or ethnicity or identity. We know nothing. But it means something to me, and maybe it means something to you, that the way Luke tells the gospel story, the way Luke frames good news, the risen Christ appears first to these two nobodies who are on the road to nowhere. It means something to me, and maybe it means something to you, that the risen Christ doesn't first go to Jerusalem and to find those chosen but frozen few, those disciples who called themselves the 12, but goes instead to the outskirts. And on the outskirts is where Jesus finds these two other disciples who just needed to take a walk, just needed to leave that community behind, just needed to leave the Jesus movement behind. It's curious, isn't it, that the way that the Christian faith always starts at the margins, always along the edges. It's interesting to me the way the Christian movement is always strongest among those without a whole lot to lose. In this encounter, we see Jesus not coming to people with power and position, not directly. We see that Jesus is not seeking out those chief priests or the rulers, the Herods or the Pilates, not the Hegseths or the Vances, to put it in present terms, not because he doesn't love them too, but because they are not going to understand him, because he's not speaking in a language that they are likely to understand. Jesus is speaking a language of love and liberation. He is insisting that nobody is disposable. He is insisting that nobody can be left behind. No one is dispensable for Jesus. And those in the business of crucifixion are not the most likely to understand the language of resurrection. I think that's also a lesson for those of us with some degree of power or position or prestige. We may need to be willing to let go of some of that privilege if we're going to really understand the things that Jesus says, if we're going to understand the things that Jesus is trying to tell us. If we are really going to want to connect with the resurrection, therefore, it might be necessary to understand our own role in the way crucifixions still happen today. In any case, soon we find Jesus seeking out these two lost and lonely disciples, and I think I can hear Jesus singing quietly to himself as he approaches them, "No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. We'll get there together. We'll never get there at all. We'll get there together. We'll never get there at all." They don't yet know it, but they are the first witnesses of the resurrection, according to Luke. The resurrection, this event that is going to transform the world. And when Jesus comes to them, they just stand still, looking sad. They are the first to witness resurrection. And in Greek, resurrection is anastasis, which means to stand up. But these two respond by standing still. But then, sparked by a question by this stranger. They suddenly start talking about Jesus. They start talking to this strange stranger who finds them on the road. They can't stop talking to him about Jesus, that iconoclastic Christ. You know, the troubler of the temple, the turner of the tables, the pet peeve of Pilate, this anti-Roman rebel, this Jesus, as they say, mighty, a prophet mighty in word and deed. So, there, on that lonely road to Emmaus, they start singing to Jesus. We're on the road again, dealing with a heavy load again. Roman soldiers came and took away our friend. So it's time to be on the road again. On the road again, though people claim that he's alive again. We're not sure he could revive again. So we're taken to the road again. Sorry. These two have this need to talk through everything they've been through. They have this, yeah, thank you. They have this need to talk through everything that they've been through, to talk through the trauma and the broken hope, how they believed that this movement of love and liberation was going somewhere, and they're not sure now where anything's going to be going. And so, even with this total stranger, they feel the need to just talk it out. You know, I had a friend call me the other day with something very heavy on his mind. And he said at one point, "Sorry, but you're the only psycho I can talk to about this." And I said, "Thanks." Luke doesn't say how long these two go on talking, but at some point Jesus has kind of had enough. This risen and rising Jesus who has taken the trouble to find them and seek them out, this Jesus who is determined that nobody gets lost, nobody gets left behind. Jesus says in love and exasperation, "You guys, how foolish you are! How foolish you are!" he says to them. "How slow of heart to believe what the prophets have told you." But the love he has for them overcomes his impatience with them. And he patiently explains everything to them, beginning with the beginning, going through the whole story of promised redemption and promised liberation, starting with Moses, the great liberator of his people, and going through all of the prophets. And he talks, and they still don't know it's him. Because sometimes words are not enough. Words are fine, words are important, words are vital, but they're often not enough. But clearly they haven't forgotten everything he taught them along the road. Taught them with his movement for love and liberation. Because when they notice it's getting late and it's getting dark, what do? Yeah, they invite him to stay with them, wherever it is that they're staying, to eat with them, because even though they don't know him and don't yet recognize him, they remember how to treat a stranger. They remember that in his movement of love and liberation, no one gets left behind. There's a powerful painting I came across recently by the 17th century master Diego Velázquez, and it's called La Cena de Emmaus, the Supper at Emmaus, which is there on the front of your bulletin. And maybe on the screen? Can we get it on the screen? It's somewhere. In this painting, Velázquez centers not these two hapless and clueless disciples, but rather this young girl working as a maid in the kitchen, probably imagined as an enslaved girl, And you can see in her eyes that she sees what the disciples still don't quite see, that they are all in the presence of the risen Christ. And there in the corner, you can see the folks on the front of your bulletin, you can see the folks in the background who are sitting with Jesus, still not recognizing him. Velázquez's painting in the 1600s seemed to imagine that this impoverished, marginalized young black woman is the first one to recognize the resurrection. How come? Because he knows that no one is getting left behind. In a moment, these two disciples, whom you can spot there in the back, they will have their eyes open. And it's not in the things he said, it's in what he does. He takes bread, he blesses the bread, and he breaks the bread, and he gives it to them. And then they recognize him. Then they know him the same way we know him today, in the breaking of bread, in the feeding of the community, in the care for a stranger. When we share communion in a few minutes, I invite you to imagine that we're at that table. Our faith may need a bit of work. Our ability to recognize in our day-to-day life or in our world, to recognize the presence of Christ may not always be strong. But know that Jesus will do what it takes to let you know and let me know that we are loved and valued and worthy and precious to God, and an essential part of a movement which still survives and thrives. So, why didn't the Jesus movement fall apart on day one? And why doesn't it fall apart today on day 729,408? Took me a little bit to figure that one out, but you've heard it from me. Because Jesus showed us and shows us how to hold it together, how to hold that movement together. Because Jesus shows us the power of radical love and unlimited resurrection, unlimited liberation. And when we do love unconditionally and we work for liberation for everybody, that's when the movement continues to live. That's when it not only survives, but thrives. The movement lives on. Because with Jesus, no one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. We'll get there together, or we'll never get there at all. We'll get there together, or we'll never get there at all. No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. We'll get there together, we'll never get there at all. We'll get there together, we'll never get there at all. We'll get there together and we will break down the walls. Amen. Amen.